The lead singer of the rock band Allison Chains has been found dead in his Seattle
There was also
home.
tragedy in rock this week. Metallica's bassist Cliff Burton was killed in a bus accident while the band was on tour in Sweden.
Rock and roll doesn't come without scars. Some of the greatest bands in history didn't just rise through the charts, they climbed through tragedy. Whether it was the sudden loss of a frontman, a freak accident, or a breaking point that shattered everything, these bands stared down heartbreak and somehow came back stronger. So today, we're going to look at 10 rock bands who faced devastating loss and still found massive success waiting on the other side, starting with a group that could have crumbled after losing its voice, but instead delivered one of the most iconic comebacks in rock history. AC/DC. In early 1980, AC/DC was riding high. Their last few albums were breaking through worldwide, and Bon Scott, the wild and liquor-soaked Bon Scott, was the perfect voice for their gritty, no-frills sound.
Back in 1955, man didn't know about a rock and roll show.
But on February 19th, that all came crashing down when Bon was found dead after a night of heavy drinking at just 33 years old. The band was gutted. For a moment, they didn't know if AC/DC should even continue. But then came Brian Johnson, a blue-collar singer from the UK with a voice like a chainsaw and a work ethic to match.
Looking at the sky just to get me high. Forget the hurts, cause I'll never die. I got nothing left.
Within months, the band was back in the studio, and the result was the album Back in Black, released in July 1980. It went on to sell over 50 million copies worldwide. Becoming one of the best-selling albums of all time. But in the next case, tragedy didn't just reshape the band, it birthed an entirely new one. The Foo Fighters. When Kurt Cobain of Nirvana died in April 1994, the music world froze. Nirvana wasn't just a band, they were the sound of a generation. And when Kurt's voice was silenced, the future of grunge, of rock itself, felt very uncertain.
This morning, an electrician sent to work on a security system looked in the window of the garage apartment and saw a body on the floor. Today, fans gathered outside Cobain's mansion, mourning the loss.
And behind the drum kit was Dave Grohl, just 25 at the time, crushed by the loss of his bandmate and friend. For months, he stayed quiet, with no press, no new music, just grief. But music has a way of pulling people back in, because after a while, Dave began writing again quietly. Then he recorded it, not with a big label or anything like that, just with himself, playing every instrument alone. And guess what? He pulled it off, naming the project Foo Fighters, with more members joining in.
Are you ready? Let's fucking go!
And slowly, what started as a private healing process turned into a debut album in 1995 and 11 others that won multiple Grammys and a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then, heartbreak struck again in 2022 when drummer Taylor Hawkins died suddenly while on tour.
Breaking news, and it is shocking news for rock and roll fans. The sudden death of Taylor Hawkins, a longtime drummer for the legendary rock band Foo Fighters. The band issued a statement on Twitter. The Foo Fighters family is devastated by
His death hit like a gut punch, but once again, the band chose resilience and returned with a new album. But here we are, an emotional piece that proved once more that grief and greatness often walk hand in hand. Coming up next is one other band that turned a heartbreaking crash into a legacy. Def Leppard. In 1984, Def Leppard had the world at their feet. Their album Pyromania had made them stars, and they were ready for more. But on New Year's Eve that same year, tragedy struck. Drummer Rick Allen was in a horrible car crash that took his left arm. For most, that would have been the end, but not for Rick, and not for the band. Instead of replacing him, Def Leppard stood by their brother. Rick learned to play drums with one arm using a custom electronic kit. It wasn't easy. It took time, frustration, and pure grit. But in 1987, they released Hysteria, and it was a massive success, selling over 20 million copies hit after hit. Alan didn't only make a recovery, he re-emerged stronger. And speaking of comebacks, few stories hit harder than the Southern rock band who came back from the unthinkable. Leonard Skinner.
He said, "Hey, now fellow with the hair colored yellow, what you trying to prove?"
In October 1977, Leonard Skinner's story nearly ended in a Mississippi forest. Their plane ran out of fuel and crashed, killing 6 people, including frontman Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, and backup singer Cassie Gaines.
Playing poker and just having a flight, on a private plane, we're going to make a emergency landing in a field, so get ready. But it was really scary for a minute, and then all of a sudden it was a real calm. Like I woke up in a swamp hearing all my brothers crying or screaming.
They were at the top of their game. Sweet Home Alabama was still echoing through every jukebox in America. And just like that, it was gone. The survivors, battered and broken, had to step away from music. How could they keep going after something so brutal? The time has a strange way of healing, or at least offering space to breathe. 10 years later, in 1987, the band returned with a tribute tour, led by Ronnie's younger brother, Johnny Van Zant, and fans showed up in droves. What was meant to be temporary turned permanent.
I said, "Excuse me." Oh, leave on tree, 'cause he was lean and mean and big and bad.
Now let's rewind a little further to a legendary band that found greatness even after losing one of its founders. The Rolling Stones. Brian Jones wasn't just the founder of the Rolling Stones, he was their spark in the early days, playing everything from guitar to sitar, fine-tuning the band's sound in the 60s. But fame and addiction don't mix well, because in 1969, Jones had become increasingly unstable and disconnected from the group. That same summer, he was fired, and weeks later, he was found dead in his swimming pool at the age of 27.
He just said Brian died. I can't believe it.
Most bands would have crumbled, but the Stones kept rolling forward. They brought in Mick Taylor and later Ronnie Wood. Then came the big ones: Sticky Fingers, Exile on Main Street, Some Girls, you name it. That's how the Stones shifted from British blues rebels to the biggest rock band on the planet, and they never looked back. Up next is one of the heaviest bands on this list, and the tragic loss that forged their most iconic sound. Metallica. More than just a fluent bassist, Cliff Burton was the soul of Metallica. His classical influence and raw energy helped shape their early sound. But in 1986, while touring in Sweden, tragedy struck when their tour bus skidded off an icy road and Cliff was thrown from the vehicle and crushed to an early death at just 24.
This past September, when their bassist Cliff Burton was killed in a bus accident, they got themselves back on the road in just 6 weeks.
the band was too shattered to continue. But surprisingly, they did when Jason Newsted joined soon after, stepping into shoes no one could truly fill. With him, Metallica recorded And Justice for All, and then the Black Album, which exploded globally. That's how they became one of the biggest rock bands of all time. And from heavy metal grief, we head into prog rock reinvention. The Allman Brothers. In 1971, the Almond Brothers band was on the rise. Their blend of southern rock and blues was catching fire. But then everything changed when Duane Allman, one of the greatest guitarists of his time, died in a motorcycle crash. He was just 24, and the band was more than heartbroken. Less than a year later, bassist Barry Oakley died the same way, just a few blocks from where Duane had fallen. It could have all ended there, but somehow they kept going, and in 1973, they released Brothers and Sisters, an album that not only carried the weight of their loss, but also their spirit. It featured Ramblin' Man, their biggest hit, and showed that even in grief, there was still joy to be found in the music. And guess what? Following that is a band that crawled out of the shadows of addiction and loss. Allison Chains. Lane Staley was the aching soul of Allison Chains. His voice was haunting, raw, and unforgettable, but addiction slowly dimmed his light when Lane was found dead in his apartment in 2002, years into reclusion. For many, it seemed like the final word on Allison Chains, a brilliant, tortured band lost to tragedy. But in 2006, something unexpected happened. The band reunited to honor Lane's memory, and with that memorial came William Duvall, whose voice brought power and respect back to the band. In 2009, they released Black Gives Way to Blue, a heavy, beautiful record that dealt directly with Lane's death. The title track, featuring Elton John on piano, was a gentle goodbye, and the fans listened. Red Hot Chili Peppers. In 1988, the Red Hot Chili Peppers were barely known outside Los Angeles, but they had a pulse that couldn't be ignored. Then everything cracked. Guitarist Hillel Slovak, one of the band's founding members and creative anchors, died of a heroin overdose at just 26. The band was devastated. Drummer Jack Irons left. Anthony Kiedis spiraled. It could have ended right there, but it didn't. They brought in a young, wild guitarist named John Frusciante, and with him came a new sound. Still funky, still punky, but more melodic, more emotional. And while everything changed at the release of Blood Sugar Sex Magic, it was Under the Bridge that turned them into global stars. never forgot Hillel. You can hear his spirit in every note that followed. And for our final story, we look at a band that turned chaos into a masterpiece. Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac has had more lineup changes than some bands have songs, but when guitarist Bob Weston died in 2012, years after his turbulent exit from the group, it marked another chapter in a long, stormy journey. Long before Rumors, the band had already lost founding guitarist Peter Green to mental illness and substance issues. They could have unraveled at any point. Instead, they adapted, again and again.
Under the shadows, damn your love, damn your life. Never break the chain, break the chain.
In 1975, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks joined, and the pieces finally clicked. Just 2 years later, they released Rumors, an album written in the middle of emotional wreckage, divorces, affairs, and broken friendships. And somehow, it became one of the best-selling records of all time. So which of these bands tickled your memory? We're waiting for you in the comments. And if you found this video enlightening, kindly leave a like and subscribe for more.